I've spent so much time analyzing Hans Niemann's games, and in today's video, I'll share what I have learned. I will break down every single opening that Hans faced when he plays the first move e4. Why I think is this important? It's because we can see that Hans improved so much in the recent years, and that we can learn a lot from him. So, I'll try to reveal everything, but since there's a lot of openings, I'll do my best. Otherwise, I'll create a part 2, so make sure to like this video. Let's begin. So what opening we're gonna cover first? That's Sicilian. I think that's one of the most popular openings. And when Hans plays against Sicilian, he plays the knight f3. Many people will think that he goes for the open Sicilian, but actually usually he aimed for the move bishop e5 check. This is one of the most popular side lines. It's also called Rosalimo. If black played knight c6, this is called Rosalimo. So after d6, bishop e5, there is 3 options where the game can go. Knight c6, which is definitely not good and no one is actually playing this move, but we're gonna make sure to cover this a little bit. Knight e7 is one of the most popular moves. This is something we're gonna cover first. And the other move is bishop to d7. So when they play the move knight e7, Hans Niemann is playing the move bishop a4. And I think this move is really classy move. The point of this move is to avoid ideas of a6, b5 immediately, which kicks your bishop out of the way. Generally speaking, if now black tries to go with a6, let me move firstly this thing here, okay? So when black goes the move a6, now we are playing the move c4. And now the big point behind this, now b5 simply doesn't work anymore, because we are about also to play knight c3 and then control this square even more. When they go e5, which is of course possible move, knight c3, let's say knight to e7, h4. So white is getting decent control in the game, and this bishop is much better to stay on a4 and make some annoying pins than to stay on e2, which is sometimes typical for these structures. And for example, in the following game that we can see that he played online against Rud Makarian, he went for d6, then Rud Makarian went knight b6, he took this knight, and now suddenly this knight on b6 is completely out of the game. Even though they later managed to push d5, then this pawn on e5 will be hanging because there is nobody to protect it for now. h5 is getting even more space on the king side, h6 and knight h4 is seeking to improve the knight later more and more, followed by some bishop e3, queen f3, g4, g5, and so on, maybe even with some ideas of rook g1. And white is getting very comfortable game. So I think a6 is nothing special here. I think one of the most logical moves is for black to go knight gf6, which hits the pawn on e4. And now one classy move that Hans is always playing is the castles. What's the point of this pawn sacrifice? Is that this is a poison pawn. Black is not losing the game after this, but he's ending up in a very bad positions where he suffers a lot from pressure on the e-line. So what actually happens? If knight takes immediately, then we gotta move rook e1, and they should come back, otherwise the knight doesn't have better spot. Like if they protect the knight with some other piece, like pawns, then this is just exposing more king, and anyway we are about to kick this knight back. So that's why knight should come back, and now d4. That's the whole point. After taking, we take back with a knight. Now they're facing the trouble against e7, and generally development pins and so on. e6 is one of the most natural moves, of course, here. We are just developing knight, and once they play the move bishop e7, now you can pause the video to find a beautiful move, and that's actually rook takes e6. F takes e6, knight takes e6. What's the point of this sacrifice? It's simply because black is stuck. He can't go castle, he can't develop pieces, he has hole on the e-line, and our rook compensation, rook sacrifice compensation is huge. So black needs to play here really precise if he wants to survive the game. For example, queen a5 is one of the only moves next to queen b6. Then bishop d2 is really important for white. because at some point you would like to get this rook on the e line. One of the only moves for black is queen e5. That's maybe the only move in a position. The reason why you don't have anything else, like you can't castle. If you play king f7, which looks very logical, then I will follow up with bishop b3, and suddenly you enter on pin, and you need to move your king again, which is definitely not good. I imagine playing the move rook g8, which is also a possible move, very possible move. At that point, we definitely got some discoveries later with this bishop, but putting the queen here, followed by rook e1 with just normal steady play, without rushing anywhere, we are just winning, because if the knight can't move, that means bishop can't move. If the bishop can't move, then the rook can't move. There is a lot of trouble for them. Not to mention that knight e7 is always hanging if the queen moves. So queen e5, and now knight b5. So we don't really want to rush for knight e7 immediately, because knight c7 always exists here, as you see. At that point, they cannot take the knight here because of knight c7 happening, and now we are winning the game. So king f7 looks logical. At that point, we have knight g5 check. They need to go on f8, bishop f4, another piece sacrifice, and I think the rest is just very, very easy, because look at your pieces. Everything is working very well. There is a lot of threats, checks, attacks. And I think black will suffer. Even though until now, I think all these moves that we provided with queen, black queen, is very, very hard to find over the board, and especially if it's rapid or blitz games online. So that's the whole point if they take on e4. This thing can happen even later with transposition, because when they go e6, their intentions are maybe later to go with something like d5. That's why c4 is a really important move. Anyway, we are familiar with this idea already because of the move a6, if you remember. And now if they take on e4, we still got to move rook e1. Knight goes back, and now d4. Bishop e7 looks like a nice move. Trying generally to develop pieces. Now take, and knight c3. So we got a compensation for this pawn. There's a lot of pins. There's a lot of actions with bishop f4, knight b5, knight c7, knight e6, So they got a pawn, but for what? For passivity? I think that's something what we always like to see. For example, castles, bishop f4, just to give you a couple of lines. Knight b6, bishop b3, and even this queen trade is nothing special for black. We are remaining with the same ideas, followed by knight b5, knight c7, knight e5, stopping bishop development. Also a4, a5 can exist later. Bishop d7, knight e5, threatening just to win the bishop here. Rook fd8, a4 gaining more space. Bishop e8, reasonable move. a5 gaining more space here. Trading, and then rerouting this bishop on this diagonal. And I think this is already over. Practically speaking, this is already over. Like knight bd7, knight e3, you can keep the pieces on the board. There is no need to rush here. And white got very pleasant game. At this point also. I think that you can also try here going something like d5. I think it's really possible, and I'm not entirely sure, but if they go e5 here, do we have any sort of sacrifice like knight takes e5? Because after pawn takes e5, we got something like d6, and that's also a huge problem for them. Like if they castles here, which is maybe one of the only moves, otherwise they cannot take on d6, we're gonna simply take with queen. So when the castle's here, taking on e7, queen takes, we end up in a similar position like earlier, but now they have a hole on d5, followed by f4, bishop g5. This pawn is not really a stability for them, like they have a lot of problems. So I think this position is also very good for white. I think I analyzed in another lines in this variation. Okay, so that's about this move order. They can also go here, move a6 again, which I don't really see makes sense, because we always have this move c4. And especially here, this works even better. Because if they now go knight takes e4, rook e1, knight f6, d4, e6, d5. And after e5, knight takes e5. So we just got the inclusion of a6 and c4, as you see. And after d takes e5, rook takes e5, this is even better, because after this we got d6. This is even better version. And now they have a lot of problems. Like when you need to retreat the knight like this in the game, you know something is wrong, right? Like white is already doing amazing. You don't even need to take on e7. You can wait, you can develop your knight, you can develop your bishop, and so on. That's why this is bad. And that's why they should go for something like e6. And here comes the steady play. We are going knight c3. For example, they just develop bishop e7, and now the point is d3. You can also go d4, but d3 is calm. d3 is calm, especially in the systems with e6. You're gonna see now the point of going d3 in few. After castles, queen e2, rook b8, let's say, trying to do some counterplay on the queen side. h3, it's a useful move anyway, because at some point when you want to play the move bishop e3, you want to stop the knight g4 and then maybe knight e5 ideas. b6, and at this point they play d4. But what is even better idea, if you ask me, is to play something like knight d2 or knight e1, and then after something like this to go f4 and just brings the knight back. This appears in ideas in these systems. Quite well idea, because later on your attack seems very promising. You're not even looking to push d4. You can focus on this side of the board and try to surprise your opponent with this pawn storm, which is really amazing, if you ask me. So another idea is to go h3. For example, knight b8 from black in this game, queen e2. So I'm following Hans Niemann's games here, and also a little bit of engine analysis later, but his games are enough. We don't need so much engine recommendations when we see human practical play. Bishop d7, bishop takes, knight fd takes, and okay, now d4. You can always end up in these structures Maroczy bind, where suddenly you don't have your bishop on e2, this bishop is already traded, and you feel comfortable because you don't have passive pieces. These knights and this bishop are working very well. Like after putting the rooks in the middle this way, or you can put the rooks like c1, d1, depends where the queen stands. If the queen is being usually on c7, then rook c1, rook d1. If they want to, go with queen somewhere else, then you can also just put your rooks on d and e1. So yeah, this is very comfortable game. You don't have any problems in these positions. There is no any certain line that you can tell that black can manage to provide some quick counterplay and provide some trouble for white. That's how much this line is solid with no trouble. You always have space advantage. Okay, that's about the line knight f6. If they go g6, this is really popular also. Now when you castled, bishop g7, we need to commit now with a move c3, because we need d4. They're not playing knight f6, as you see. Maybe they're gonna play something different, like e6, knight e7, who knows. But of course knight gf6 is much better move. Rook e1, defending the pawn. You're not bringing your bishop back, because you don't need to do that immediately. I imagine castling, d4. And now once you grab the space like this, your next move is threat of close to e5, not immediately, but maybe firstly h3, then knight bd2, and so on. If they ever take you on d4, they're gonna just help you, because this is creating the square for your knight on c3, and that's beautiful. I imagine a lot of people are getting scared of these pawns in the middle, and they're committing with a blockade of e5 and entering these structures. Here you can be calm and just bring your bishop back to c2 in defense, because anyway their idea is to go a6 and b5. And you can also take on e5, like Hans did in one of his games. And after trading these pieces and trading the queens, he entered very normal endgame position, where he just got this beautiful d5 potential outpost in future against c5 pawn, which he's going most probably to attack with bishop e3, and later on, after moving the bishop to c2 now, going a4, knight e3, knight c4, bishop e3, and so on. And then this bishop will even go going here or staying on g7. He will feel stuck because of hitting the pawns. And we can see what happens here. As you see, as I mentioned, developing, like I said. So very, very easy game. And then I guess king f2, probably with some g4, h4 ideas, or h3 or something like that, just to get more space. Very easy game. We can see how he played this one, how he actually did the converting of this game. Yeah, now there's a beautiful spot on e4. He can try to handle that. Yeah, knight c4 happens. Already there is a lot of tactics. As you see, king and the rooks are on the same squares, on the same diagonals, and when you have light square bishop, that's definitely not good. And here already got some tactics, right? Knight is pinned, he needs to defend it. Rook d8 comes, bishop g5, threatening some take, and bishop h6, and the game is already going in the wrong direction for black. So yeah, on g6, I can recommend you c3 as Hans playing. That's beautiful. Okay, so I mentioned a6, I mentioned g6. If they go knight gf6 and then go something like a6, then we still got c4, and we pretty much analyzed this line and this variation. So we covered everything important. I like this move bishop before, that's what Hans Niemann played, and that's my recommendation. So the next variation that we are going to cover is after giving a check on b5, bishop to d7. When we take this, they have two options how to retake. Knight takes is less popular than queen takes, so we're gonna cover firstly queen takes. And this is one of the most solid moves. c4 is my recommendation, and also what Hans Niemann is playing, because you're simply not allowing any sort of, d5 and destroying your structure, or e6 and d5. This is just not possible in these scenarios. And you're now playing Maroczy bind positions with already traded light square bishop, which is in a lot of scenarios very good version for white, because there is no light square pressure. Usually we know that in these systems, black is, after developing his pieces this way or this way, he's putting the bishop on b7, and this can be quite uncomfortable in many variations. That's why I like this way of playing. And if knight c6, we just play knight c3. We can also play d4 immediately. That's also very possible. All these variations are transposing into the same line if we go in this Maroczy bind. But now after going d4 here, there is options for black. A lot of grandmasters on high level are playing this move queen g4, which is leading to one very forcing line where after playing d5, knight e4, knight takes d4, queen takes d1, leading to an endgame. It's really forcing endgame. Like, I like to take here with king. Many players are taking with knight, but taking with knight is not ideal here, because after pawn takes, simply this knight is restricted. So I don't like this version, practically speaking. I like to take with king, and after pawn takes here, to go knight b5. Only move is rook c8 to stop knight c7. Otherwise, if they try something like king d7, which looks very natural, we are simply winning the pawn on d4 by force, and we are pawn up in this game. They can try something like e5, but just m% takes and knight e4, we are just much better. We win a pawn and we win the game. So that's why rook c8, and here it's really important to go f3 to not give the pawn on e4. There's also an option, I think, here to go b3 maybe, and actually give this pawn away, but I think this line is a little bit tricky. So the safest way is to play f3, gave the pawn on c4, but this pawn doesn't matter, because your king can be really fast on d3, and then anyway this pawn will fall. This pawn is not a problem. Bishop d2, nice move. Trying to get your rooks into the game as quick as possible, because you see undeveloped pieces, king is in the center, there is no space for black at all, and the pawn count here is not even important. Like, if they try to kick your knight out of the way, there is a fantastic move b3. When they move the rook out of the way, there is knight takes d4, and suddenly we just bring the pawn back, after some moves, we can face this in the game, where definitely white is having more advantage, space advantage. You don't really need to trade the rooks. I'm already seeing that if we trade pair of rooks, like usually black is trying to do here, there is a lot of options for us to go with something like g4 later. Like especially here, if they go something like g6, rerouting the knight on e3 is useful thing. Here exchanging is not bad for us, and now g4 is already nice potential for white here in this endgame. Like these pawns are not as safe as it looks like, because king and bishop you're protecting, pieces are passive, knight needs to find better square, and yeah, I mean our pieces are not so much active, but they're definitely better than the black's pieces. So okay, we went too far, but yeah, on the high level they're facing this, and my recommendation is to take with king. I like this line better than knight takes d1, and practice shows that king takes d1 is, I think, a better move. So if they go for this aggressive line with queen g4, many players here will just go in the very popular line and just went something like this. This is something you can expect on every level, because this is very popular structure. People are simply aware of this and they will always do it. So after g6, it's really important to not play now move bishop e3, because there is the move knight g4. That's why we are including the move h3. And after bishop g7, then now bishop e3. Castles, and now take a look at this position. This is not over. Like we say, opening is over, and now, fine. We need to know what to do here. What is our plan? And the best plan that can white do here is to put a queen on d3, play rooks in the middle, like rook fd1 and rook ac1, and at some point, move the knight on b3 and push c5. That's good plan for white. Also depends what is black doing. Like if black rushes to commit e6, d5 in these structures, we have a nice refutation to that. And actually queen d3 is the best one. I'll show you in the Hans game, firstly how it was. Like he went rook c1, this guy went e6, Hans went queen d2, and now this guy went d5. Takes, and they simply end up in the endgame, where Hans is fine, but this pawn on d3 feels a little bit uncomfortable, together with this bishop on g7. Like, black is totally fine here. Hans won this endgame. He's very good in endgames. But for you, might be tricky to enter all of these trading systems. So what is better move? What is better idea? To play queen d3, and if they go e6, to go rook ad1, and after d5, you simply have take, and now firstly eliminating the knight and pushing e5. So you're taking with c pawn, not with e pawn. You want to keep the e pawn because after knight e8 here is f4, and strategically we are achieving domination in the center and the queen side. Because this bishop is locked, this knight is completely out of the game. He definitely needs some time of regrouping from c7 to e6. And I recently played the games with some of my students, and I can tell you I was black against my students who is around 1900, and student managed to get almost a winning game, but I couldn't find the best refutation. Like, even though you managed to put your knight on e6, what next? Like, white can even pick at some point if he has some tactical ideas to break with f5. You don't really want to play g4. The whole point of f4, e5 is to close this bishop, and now to slowly focus on the c line and this dark square control, where we're gonna apply domination. So this is a great improvement, and of course they don't need to follow that part. They can also go rook fc8, which is another very good and following idea. Here I can recommend you to go with a move b3, like Hans is usually doing in his game. The point, you cannot go queen d3 immediately now because there is knight e5 and you can simply lose the pawn and lose the game. So that's not good. So that's why we are going b3, protecting the pawn. a6 is usually the idea. Then later they want to push b5, even with a lot of sacrifices. That's why a4 is a nice refutation to this. And I'm imagining they're still playing a6. Anyway, this move looks good because people are usually putting the knight on d5. And I'm not recommending to commit this knight d5 at all in these structures, only if you have some tactical follow-up. Queen d2, you need to organize your pieces. First, you need to connect your rooks, to put a queen on a solid square, bring the rooks in the middle, and then later you're gonna look for some knight jumps. But do not rush for these things, okay? That's very important. Okay, I think I analyzed some moves with engines here, and engines are recommending to position the rooks this way. And if they try something like knight b4 to, organize d5, then we can simply wait. I believe that this bishop can even come to g3 later and focus on this diagonal. Maybe not the best idea, but something I can look for. It's important to not go any sort of a5 here, like I've seen from some Hans games, because these pawns are enough to control the queen side. And now our idea mainly is to focus how we can break the center where we have a space advantage. That's something what is really important here. Hans did some a5, and apparently this pawn becomes later a weakness. Maybe the queen couldn't take it immediately because of some tactical ideas with rook a1 and so on, I don't know. But you don't really need to move these pawns. And b4 square is not really a weakness. You always have your dark square bishop, you always have your knights, so you can always kick this knight out of the way if you need, or trade it. Okay, so that's about this variation, this continuation. I imagine this can happen in your games. Here, if they go something like e6, like happened in a couple of games, then you can just simply transpose, as you see in these lines. Bishop e7, Hans decided b3, but he played the move bishop e2, which is not good idea. Bishop is simply better to stay on e3. And since now they already played e6, then, they didn't commit the g6 idea, and bishop g7 is slightly different. This bishop is anyway this way or the other way better on e3, because you're simply not putting pressure anything on this diagonal. Like, he's not scared of that. You need your bishop here because the happening will happen here. So we're gonna see some story in the center and the queen side. a6, h3, you are playing some useful moves. And then a4 is a nice idea anyway to stop b5. Let's say queen c7, rook c1, queen a5, f4. Here comes the attack. Knight e7 to move the knight. King h1, useful moves. So all these moves that we mentioned are very useful. And now suddenly Hans decided to go with rook f3, which leads to some rook g3 and queen g4 ideas. And suddenly you see that kingside attack is very strong. And there is no clean idea how black will stop it. Because if he tries something like g6, then a lot of f5 ideas are possible. And it's creating the dark square weaknesses in the position. Bishop f6 and knight e2, simply stabilizing, nothing trading, like leaving the position this way. And yeah, our next ideas are definitely something along our rook g3 ideas and so on. Okay, I can also imagine that in this position here, black is playing the move e5. And this happens time to time. They block the middle, and how you should play against this is just to play knight c3, then d3. If bishop e7, after castles and let's say knight f6, your plan is to switch on the queenside play by going rook b1, a3, and looking for b4. If they stop you, you just finalize your development with bishop e3, if h6, knight e2, and you're typically looking at some point to organize f4 idea. If knight h7, knight e5 is a good idea here, because they move the knight out of the way. They want to commit with the same thing. Also, knight e5 is supporting b4, close position, but it's important that you have a dark square bishop that you don't want to really give it up. So when they jump knight e4 and so on later, also you're threatening now knight b6, so they need to handle that. When they jump knight e4, you don't really need to take immediately. Sometimes this pawn on d4 can be strong for the future endgames. So if you are not forced to take, leave it there and wait for the perfect moment to take when some tactical follow-up happens. So yeah, that's about these systems. I imagine, or like even if you break with d4 immediately and got this on the board, pretty much f3 is a nice also idea that you can play, followed by castles. And let's say if they still go with a6 and they want to push b5 on the other side, here comes this idea of knight b3 that I mentioned earlier, where your idea is to push c5 and aim to the end game with a queen trading, because your knights are more organized to attack the queenside pawns on b7 and a6. For example, after knight e5, which looks very logical to many players, and then doing a follow-up of rook ac8 or rook fc8 and targeting the c4 pawn, I imagine this happening all the time. Queen e2, and now after rook fc8 or rook ac8, for example, now c5 is really strong. And yeah, the main problem for them is like if they take this one, then rook comes to the game, and it's not even important the pawn on c5. Now what happens is actually f4. And when they move the queen f4, if the knight jumps there, then e5, and even if losing this bishop here, we are simply getting crushing attack, where now we are threatening the queen, the e sandwich check, the bishop to regain the knight, and Anjing is already saying here white is winning, which is incredible. Yeah, I believe you're not gonna hurt yourself if you just take the knight and don't see this tactic, because anyway what remains is this bad bishop on g7, completely closed by this pawn here, and pawn up doesn't really matter. Follow up with 95, 94, you know, pressure here on these pawns are huge. So anyway, we are having amazing game here, even if you don't see this tactic. In one of his games was b5 here, and after c takes b6, Hans was just winning, because this is a clear pawn up. What he didn't see, he went here bishop f2, and suddenly this knight becomes a little bit annoying piece on c4. What he didn't see here is amazing resource knight c5, which leaves the black speechless. Why? Because when he simply takes on c5, you just take on c4, and strategically speaking, this is over. Like rooks are coming on d and c, pawn is falling down. This pawn is always a big threat of some b7, and it's always protected by knight or some knight e5, and you know, this diagonal doesn't really even matter anymore. And yeah, white is just completely winning here. Like what can arise is something like this, and after getting this on the board, I imagine black is resigning sooner than later, because knight here and here, and you know, b7, rook b1, rook c1, and that's game over. So yeah, that's Hans Niemann's repertoire. You see how much joy this gives to us. Anyway, this is another idea of f3. So I'm imagining your opponents are playing something like this in your games. Okay, that was queen takes d7. So when we take here and they take back with queen, what happens if we go and they take here back with knight? So when they take back with the knight, there is a nice move that Hans plays all the time, and the move that got my attention because I'm playing something similar in all these systems, and that's the move queen e2. The point of this move is to support later in the future e5. Anyway, vacate the square for the rook later on d1 and go c4 d4. So what we can get on the board is something like knight gf6 anyway, then we go c3. And we are not still castling because we don't have any danger of king having in the center now. Our main focus is to strike with d4 as soon as possible. And if they decide just to, you know, leave that pawns there, then you immediately have the move e5, which targets the knight on f6. I'm seeing many players are taking this pawn. We take back, and after knight e5 we push c4, which gives us a lot of space advantage. This knight is not dangerous at all. There is no forks, there is no threats. Your next move is castles, and then after knight c3 we simply have amazing position. We're gonna create a follow-up of something like bishop f4. If the queen moves to c7, which I'm seeing a lot of the time, bishop f4 followed by h4, h5, h6, typical idea on the king side, which takes the space for white a lot. With idea of rook e1, you don't really need a3 because you don't want to help your opponent improve the knight with tempo and then get it to d4. Knight on b4 is totally harmless to our position, and at some point we're gonna use the advantage of this dark square weakness. So is it this way or this way? It's amazing. And I'm not talking about that if some attack appears on the other side, we can have nice ideas to support the attack on the king side. Yeah, I think one of the games went something like bishop f4. Let's say here black just brings voluntarily the knight back to c6. a rook from, I think rook from a to d1. Let's say usually they play maybe a6 to stop some knight b5 ideas. And at this point here, even such ideas like rook d3 and simply looking forward to bring this rook to g3 somehow with rook e1, you know, moving this knight and h4, h5, h6. Like white is getting so nice join this game. Any sort of knight b6, looking like giving some pressure to your opponent c4, simply gonna be met by b3, and we are totally safe on the queen side. So that's if they, after e5, go d takes. If they just avoid that with knight e5 immediately, then we got immediately c4, and this looks very similar because after knight b4, the thing now we can go for the move a3, and when they go knight e5, we can take on d6 and then push d5. This is slightly different variation where white got even more pleasant position, since now after trading and making this bad isolated pawn on e6 gives a lot of joy to us to play this game. Knight g5, h6 and knight e4. Not even taking this one, it's not good to take because there is some line queen e7, and now your knight is a little bit trapped. You cannot really move the knight comfortably because they also got some discoveries later with this knight, and we can, like, I think on knight f4 there is even some ideas of going knight takes c4 here because you can take back with queen, like your queen is pinned, and if you take and exchange the queens, that leads to some endgame, which is I think solid for us because we got some knight g6 later. But anyway, that's why it's better to go knight e4 and simply play strategically. You don't need pawn, you're playing on the bad structure, on the close positions, on the bad pieces. And yeah, like followed by castles, I guess, knight c3, and, you know, bishop e3, focusing on this rook d1, focusing on the dark squares, and so on. So at this point, if you go c4, the other critical move is queen a5 check. Then you just have bishop d2 and then knight b4. Now do not play a3, you're gonna blunder maybe later with knight c2. So go castle, be safe, and still, if they take, you take back, and at some point now you're gonna threatening the move a3. So they need to go back, and queen a5 check doesn't matter so much. So after c4, another move could be to go back here, and this is something what we like. We always need to take on d6 if they give us a chance. And after bishop takes d6, here actually is another amazing idea that Hans had in his game, but he missed it, and that's the move b4. The point is, whatever they take, now you have c5, and you're simply winning the piece with this idea. So yes, after the move queen e2, another option for them is to play e5 instantly, and this is something that we again strike with c3 and then d4. So pretty much always on e5 we are going with a d4, and this is something what makes black suffer in the long run, because he has a bad bishop on f8, and knight on d7 is a little bit misplaced. That's why we in one game see that this guy, I mean his opponent, went knight b8, knight c6. And after he takes d4 here, which is for some reason the best line according to engine, which is totally unnatural to me, we just take, and now some breaks happens. Castle, castle, and now just rook d1. You know, our next moves are very logical. We don't want to rush here, we just want to simply develop the pieces, and they're gonna feel the pressure on this pawn on d6. Like I see some game queen a5, bishop d2, trying to provoke you on b2, then bishop e3, and this pawn sacrifice is actually good for us because now I think taking here is losing on the spot because we just have taken, then queen takes e7. Any take anyway with the other pieces is losing, so they need to bring the queen back on c7, and now we just take on d6, bishop takes, and knight bd2. So looks like even game, but the problem is that queen and other pieces are very exposed from rooks, while our queen is very safe under this piece shelter here, bishop and knight, and there is no trouble on the other side from the queen and bishop, so we are totally safe about this. And that's why this move queen e2 is so powerful, because your idea is c3, d4, after castles, rook d1, and, you know, having amazing game already from the opening. Is there anything else that I missed here? g6. is also another idea where we actually again go for the move c3, and after bishop g7, d4 takes, and something like d5 I imagine happening. We just have e5 closing the diagonal. Here already is slightly better, in practice even more. If knight gf6, knight c3, castle, we don't want to rush for any e5, d5. We want to, just play with patience, play some useful moves such as rook d1, then h3. We don't need to rush anywhere because we got the space, we got the advantage, and we are very safe with it. I have one idea here. If they commit with e6 to go bishop g5, and on h6, which is typical to happen in some club level, to take on f6 and then to go for e5. Here black needs to understand that bringing bishop on e7 is more important than bringing the bishop on the other side, because bringing the bishop there can result into knight b5 and then jumping on d6. In the long run, we're going to use the power of this square and make our opponent in trouble. So that's why bishop e7 is a better idea. And after bishop e7 here, now we already got this tactical flow of d5 where simply that's the power of the knights in the middle, the queen, the rooks already activated, like the most simplest opening that we can face currently now. So yeah, that's about this system also. Oh, sorry, actually there is one system that I missed, I think, and that's if they go with a after this, I think e6, we go d4, they take on d4, we take back, and now they play d5. Yes, this is the line that I missed. e5, and now bishop b4, check, knight b2, and then jumping on e4. This is the only one line that looks very stable for black because it reminds on the French structures. But after castles and after trading these pieces automatically, looks like black is getting solid position, and it is. It looks really comfortable. If we flip the board here, we can see that black seems to be all right. That's totally fine. And many players would stick for the kingside attack plan, but since we traded the pieces, we need to focus on the other side, on the queen side. Because this knight is bad actually on d7, misplaced. This knight would like to be on c6 and target our weakness on d4. If he commits to b6 square, then after queen b4, they're already in the strategical trouble, because after the move b3, where this knight goes. And also we are the first that take control over the queen side. Like if they go something like h6, trying to play some waiting moves, h4 is also good by our side. Let's say rook c8 and h5, followed by after queen d7, b3, let's say rook c6. I'm already seeing here that we have some ideas of queen a3, followed by, threat on a7. And if they ever take us here on c8, on c1, then we just take back. So a6, I think it's not good because of take, rook c1, queen d7, and now queen d6, and maybe we are even winning because taking here is not an option. It gives the square for the knight. This knight is bad, rook c7 is coming. So even if they take our pawn, we're gonna collect the other important pawns, and our knight is getting to the game. So you see that why Hans is good in endgames, because pretty much every single he's opening, if he doesn't trick his opponents with some tactics, he's following some solid endgames, as you see here with activity, and getting really nice positions. Just to tell you that rook c8 is never possible, like we just take and d7 and that's it. Game over. Yeah, and that was about the following variation against Sicilians. So we covered all these variations, and now what I would like to show you is variations in other openings, such as French defense. So how Hans is playing against French defense, he's using this advanced line, and after normal move knight c6, knight f3, now they have a couple of moves here, but the most popular moves are queen b6 and bishop d7. I think bishop d7 is more solid move than queen b6, but let's say queen b6 is the most popular move. And the point how Hans is playing here, he's going g3, which is something you're not gonna see from anyone. The point of this move is to get the bishop not just on g2, it's also to get on h3, just quickly to go castles and to put rook on e1 and then come with the bishop back to f1. And maybe now you're thinking, wait, why we are not doing that with idea of bishop d3 and just castles? Why we need to go with bishop h3? Because g3 is anyway useful in these structures. It's controlling the f4 square and also supporting h4 later, and it's giving a nice spot for a king in the future on g2. That's why it's not, according to engines, this line is like maybe 0-0, but for the practice, it's really uncomfortable for black if he doesn't understand the main point later. So let's see some of his games in this opening. Let's see how he plays this. For example, c takes d4 happens in many of his games, and now just something like knight g7, then he goes bishop h3, bishop d7, knight c3, knight g6 castles, bishop e7, rook e1, so everything is standard, no some crazy ideas. And now after something like rook c8, since black would like to get some play on the queen side, Hans is playing this useful move rook b1 because he knows that at some point he will move the bishop to e3, so some piece needs to guard this pawn. And after castles, this bishop comes to g4. So firstly here Hans blundered that he has the move knight takes d5, which immediately wins material, because if pawn takes, that there is bishop takes d7. This is another nice trick why this idea is so powerful. Okay, never mind, he missed that, but bishop g4 is nice move. The point of that is to not allow h5 when he wanna play the move h4. So now when he plays h4, there is no any sort of h5 because this knight feels cramped here. He's anyway zoned, and when we play h5, this knight needs to go back. And that's the problem. Bishop g4 is so powerful this way. And for some reason, black decided here to sacrifice the material. D takes c5 and then to take on c3. Maybe even Hans blundered here, I would say. Like, maybe this is actually not so much convenient position for white now when I see. Maybe he actually blundered. But overall, I can say that he had a chance. No, actually here after knight of fate, bishop e3, this is not really a big problem. Also queen needs to find some good square. Actually rook takes e3 is the only move, because if you keep your queen something like queen to b4, I can simply take you since my rook is protected. So black actually needs to sacrifice the exchange and continue the game this way. After f takes, this is not good move, like rook takes is better. I don't know why he took with a pawn. Maybe he was thinking of activating on the f line, but this is very critical mistake. So rook takes is much better. Maybe he was scared of some bishop c5, but you know, just retreating the rook here back. And yeah, you're continuing with, and he's continuing with his plan. Maybe overall this bishop looks like the monster of the dark squares, but I'm not seeing that he's finding a useful square for this bishop, since now we have a threat of even b4 later, since they can't take. We have some tactical flaw with rook from e to b2. Anyway, yeah, but the main thing, he missed this tactic of knight takes d5. So yeah. What can appear also similar to these lines, there's a game with Magnus, where Magnus played, I think, bishop d7, then with sin g3, and now something like knight g7, yeah, bishop h3, c takes d4, c takes d4, knight g6. So this is Magnus' game as black versus Hans as white. So we are seeing these typical moves, like he's always doing these moves, which is solid. Like there is no so many lines where you're memorizing different type of variations. Rook c8 and now bishop g4. So white is already here very solid, and his move is h4. And now after h5, where this knight goes? On h8, I mean, that will be ridiculous. And now Magnus played the move f6, which leads to a very bad position, because after e takes, a rook takes, and simply h5 followed by knight h8 and bishop f4, like white is here dominating. Look at this square here, and look at this trouble on e6. You know, some stacking on the e line will happen later. That's why Magnus suffered here, and he decided to give up the exchange by rook takes f4. Anyway, the position is still so powerful for white. Maybe Hans had a better decision here to not plant the knight immediately, maybe actually to go with a bishop here, because after something like, let's say, knight f takes e5, d takes f5, and moving the rook somewhere back, let's say on f8, there are some tactics with knight takes d5 here. This is simple tricks that exist in these structures. These pawns looks like safe pawns, but they are usually very, very weak. Anyway, you see how much pressure we got with this idea. So if he picks to stay with a queen on d8 and go with this, it's also very possible. Yeah, here they can play also some other way, like they can go with f6 directly. And now we can just simply play anyway bishop h3, because this structure is also very convenient. This pawn on e5 is a so strong pawn, because it's covering all these squares. There is no counterplay and there is no normal development for black. Like queen c7, castles, we don't really care about e5 pawn. If they take it, they're gonna regret it, because this opens just the e line for our rook and target on the king. Bishop e7, rook e1, and now black castle long, which looks like a super comfort position, but I believe that after some knight a5, provoking a6, and then going some rook b1 and b4 ideas can lead to a disaster for black on the queen side. So let's see what happens in the game. Hans picked c4, then knight a3, then he went takes, and you see already the problems on d6, followed by something like this, and rook c1. Maybe something like this appears in the game. Yeah, knight e6, as I mentioned. Bishop comes back to g2 on a better diagonal. Queen comes on a very strong diagonal. g5 doesn't really threaten anything. This looks like a blunder, but there's queen b7 refutation. And yeah, simply this endgame is much better. Here even tactical flow of winning more pawns, and yeah, white is just much better, as you see. So yeah, overall, we're seeing very nice strategy with g3. So I believe you can copy this idea. Like if they go knight h6, this is totally different line. Just to tell you that here you cannot play g3 anymore. It simply doesn't work, because if you go g3 here, like black will simply jump on f5. And I think after bishop h3, okay, this can happen also with knight e7 and knight f5. But I think I actually got better line here with taking on h6. It's possible still go g3 and knight and bishop h3. It's very possible. But if they go this way, I really recommend to take, because after take bishop e5 is strong, queen b6, and now important move to place queen e2. Yeah, you cannot go a4, you cannot go c4, your pawn on b2 is hanging, you cannot take still on c6. Queen e2 is better move just because you want to provoke them to go a6, to push your bishop, and then after take to go castle, and then suddenly play on the queen side. So the happening is not going to be on the king side. Like they still didn't castle. Maybe they're gonna play rook g8, or maybe they're going bishop g7 and castle. So we don't know that. I played a couple of blitz games here, and I can tell you that this is maybe the best option, just to focus on the queen side. Like let's say they go c takes, and c5, knight bd2 for example, c takes d4, and something like knight b3, and winning this pawn back is, for me, looking very strong. I think bishop b5, you can just move the queen on d2, followed by knight f takes or knight b takes d4. And yeah, you want to push some pawns. Like you definitely have the advantage on the queen side, because you have 2 versus 1, and creating the passed pawn is very easy after all. And their structure is very suspicious. You see that they have many multiple double pawn structures, many pawn islands, and potential weak king in the center. So knight h6 line is not a big deal. If they go with this line knight g7, which could be possible, then after just bishop d3 and takes knight f5, I'm recommending you to take on f5, enter these structures, and push h4, h5 as much as you can on the other side. These structures are already very convenient for us, because we simply have the full control of the dark squares. And after castling, later on going rook e1, followed by queen d2, rook c1, you know, at some point we can take and then just put a bishop here. It's a very good position. And h6, yes, h6 will follow up later. Like knight takes, bishop takes, f take, d takes is also possible. The point is your knight will suddenly come on d4, and this bishop will feel the trouble. Like bishop takes e5 is so natural move here because keeps the tension, and also you want to go f4, but there's some move f4 here, and I guess that they want to go something like this. So that's why d takes is much better, keep closing, and usually this pawn on d5 becomes a target, and we also created the square for our knight to jump in later. Okay, yeah, that was French defense. You don't need to study that much. By the way, I will put a file in the description so you can check it out. The PGN file about the Hans Niemann repertoire. Currently now including Sicilian, French defense, Scandinavian, all Sicilians, so everything that you can face. Scandinavian, French, I've allowed Caro-Kann. I've also had some my recommendations that I don't like personally, but I'll put my recommendations and also Hans Niemann recommendations. So you can check it out in the description on the Hans Niemann repertoire. So, yeah, let's go and see other variations. Like on Scandinavian, he pretty much plays very basic chess. He doesn't go for any crazy lines. He simply develops his pieces. Let's see this queen a5 move. Then we just played d4. There's also one line that he won g3. I think he was just playing for one this game, but this g3 is also legit. It's in the file. But we're gonna mainly focus on d4 because that's the best. Let's say knight f6. Knight f3, typical flow. And now if they go with something like bishop g4, the point is we can simply kick this bishop out of the way with a move h3. This is the popular line, and after bishop h5 we have g4, and after this I like this move 92 better than 95 because we are closing the options for any sort of pins here, any sort of jumps, and knight c4 is anyway coming next. Bishop g2, and short side castles. You can also aim to castle long, that's possible, but castle short is much quicker. On the other way, if they go something like knight c6, okay, Scandinavian is popular maybe on a lower level, but on a little bit higher level they are not playing this strictly. If knight c6, bishop d2 is really important move, trying to do some ideas of bishop c4 later, and then knight to d5. A6 played, bishop c4. Now really important for black is to reroute the queen on the other side. Otherwise they can face the problems already with a move knight e5, which will sooner or later trap the queen on the queen side. So that's why queen h5. And yeah, here Hans is playing the move knight e5 simply because they can't take the pawn on d4. There's bishop takes f7 and offering the pawn in the middle. So if knight takes, pawn takes, queen takes e5. Okay, actually I think this is not good. At this point the point is to trade the queens, not to take with a pawn there. They have some knight e3 move to, the point of this move is if they take here and you take here on e5, this knight is stuck. And next move is something like bishop e2, which is sooner or later trapping the knight. So that's why they're giving the check first here. And after we take that back with the bishop, now they take here. But anyway, we got a nice game because knight e5 is coming. Knight on the rim is a grim, and we are also threatening on c7, followed by longside castles and rook e1. So that's, I think, very nasty idea, nasty positional idea for developing your center. Anyway, if they go with something like bishop f5, we are playing typical, again, bishop d2. That's what Hans is doing. c6, bishop c4, just normal development. Queen moves back because some knight e5 will appear time to time. Queen e2, and yeah, now we just longside castles. So we got nice position. We are ready to put the other pieces to the game. And already here d5 works. d5 follow up and break works. So knight takes d5, knight takes d5, bishop takes d5, and looks like we unnecessarily open up the c line, but there is no big problem here. If they go with something like bishop e7, we are not even taking the pawn on b7. We have this move knight e5, knight e4 that hits this bishop here. If they step back, now we can take, and after rook b8, we can just bring the bishop back here. If you're not feeling safe on the queen side, you're missing this line because let's say queen c7, trying to threaten something here. Now powerful move, knight c6. Hitting the rook. So rook b6 is not really possible. We also have some bishop a5 moves, just simply winning the material, and we can also go queen c4 on defending it. They can never castle because this is always saying we check. And then we have ideas of bishop f4, still bishop a5, and so on. Computer move, of course. Anyway, Hans played knight h4. He didn't play d5 because practically speaking, looks risky to him to open c line. And after bishop g4, f3, and then go g4, and this is just so much winning because even f5 is coming, and now game is pretty much over. Look at this position, like everything is under pressure. Castling, I think castling short is not even possible. Like we have just take, and now some f5. You know, game is over because this pawn is falling twice. They can't take because bishop is hanging, and that's it. Like white is winning so much. Yes, technically speaking, Scandinavian is not really a big problem. Just be natural, develop your pieces. If they go with this line of queen d6, which is interesting line, then anyway d4, knight f6, knight f3, and now they like to play here also knight c6, where I'm recommending just to play the normal move bishop e2. You can also go here the move d5, which I played myself, and now knight b4 is the option here, but you need to know the theory here to play knight b5, queen d8, c4, I think e6, and something like that. It's very sharp variation, going in some very strange directions. It's very possible to play this line, like d takes, b takes, and now just moving the knight back. But if you want to just play it natural, you can just go bishop e2, and if they go bishop g4, just castle short, they castle long, and here comes this knight g5 move, where a lot of people can wonder because simply there is a bishop hanging and there is a f7 hanging, and now the game is over. Because after take, we do not take back with a knight, which looks very logical, like Hans did in the game. He wanted to protect the pawn on d4. This is a mistake. We are taking back with a queen. And now after knight takes d4, which looks like, okay, why we take with the queen, why we run into the, these tactics. Anyway, we are still threatening on f7, but the joy of this knight is also to focus on some threats, such as knight b5 when this knight gets moved, which hits this and hits the queen and increases the pressure. So if you go queen d3 here, and if they go back with the queen, we can simply take, they take back, and then we take on f7. What if they defend this c6, f7 somehow? Actually, there is no way, because queen cannot move here and here. There is nothing to defend it. If they move the rook, like rook g8 or rook d8, that doesn't help so much. If they try something like knight g4, trying to give you checkmate, there is this beautiful resource, queen h3, pinning the knight, still threatening knight f7. If queen g6, then just check with a queen, and simply we are just winning. Yes, that was Scandinavian. And yeah, the last opening I want to show you for today's video is the Hyper Dragon. So when we got this on the board, now I would like to recommend you c3, which is also one of the main weapons from the Hans. And now they have two options. They can go for the move d5, and they can go for the move bishop g7. Also, there is some move knight f6. So let's check all of them. Let's start with the most natural move, bishop g7. Here we got a beautiful center, takes, and now people are playing this move d5, where we simply achieve something like in the previous variations where we block the center with a move e5. And now the point is, if they go with a knight here, which is typical knight development, to put a knight here on f5, we can block the bishop coming on g4. Because that can be annoying to our knight, since later when they jump with a knight on c6, they got the idea of tactics on d4. So that's why I'm really recommending to go this move h3, and now just typically to develop your knight on c3. And on f6, they want to open up the bishop, but this costs them later the e5 square. So even if you take on f6 here, they take back. Later on, when they play f5, this square is permanently weak, and we can use that square for the future. That's why this is a little bit downside of this opening for black, but it's playable. People are playing this. What is even better move here? It's very, very nice computer move, bishop b5. The point of this move is to regroup this bishop on b3 and then to focus on this square here. And you know that playing e6 is something what black simply doesn't want to do, because it reminds him later on the French defense. So if we see here f takes e5, we simply take with the d pawn, and now the fire opens on the pawn here. And after they play e6, simply something what we want, we can castle, followed by bishop g5, I guess rook c1. Moving this bishop anyway would be useful, because we would be on the target here, and so on and so on. Like, let's say knight f7, trying to hit the pawn, then rook e1. I imagine bishop d7. We can even wait with the bishop there and play something like bishop f4 to additionally protect here. On a6, now we can tell to our pawn, okay, I don't want to trade the pieces. Let's keep the pieces on the board. Knight c6, queen d2, and we have this static play from our game. Then rook ad1 will happen. And yeah, knight takes d5 is always appearing time to time with a follow-up of e6. So I don't like the way of black going this early f6 idea, but it can happen. a6 is another move, trying to stop this move, bishop b5. Then we're anyway playing h3, which is nice. Knight c6, and now amazing idea, which reminds on French what Hans is doing, is g3, and this actually works. You simply want to have your bishop on g2, because in the future this pawn will be always a target. Knight h6, castle, castle, knight c3, and yeah, we have a very easy game. Like maybe white is even much better, because now after queen d2, where this knight goes, and yeah, simply we have a crushing kingside attack. Bishop c7, for example, rook c1, e6. Yeah, bishop g5 followed by queen d2 and g4 with bishop f6 is already winning. This is something what I analyzed. Who is gonna defend the king? Queen side is very safe. There is no counterplay. Simply all these pieces are, yeah, they're kind of developed, but they're not in the game. Center is blocked. French defense not working here. Type of French defense doesn't work. It's always bad to have bishop on g7 in French defense. So this is just sort of position that looks like that. Anyway, that's why maybe more convenient idea is to go knight f6, but it's the same story. We just go e5, knight e5, d4. We are getting another structure here where black remains really passive, and here Hans in one game played this amazing move, queen h4, which simply is not allowing them later to castle because of brutal tactical ideas of checkmates, you know, with his bishop and together with his knight. So h6, trying to stop bishop g5 or knight g5, then we can develop bishop on c4. Now the f7 is on target, now castles, b5, but we just ignore it. And for example, something like this can happen, and not even with queen takes, because we need to keep eye on this pawn. We want to play f4 and later f5, and so on. Eventually, I think if they protect with a6, then we just go with this knight to the d4. We can also go with something like rook h1, king h1, and rook g1 to open up the g line and create some decisive attack. So after c3, d5 is, I think, maybe the most critical move, where we can extend with e5, and look at this. If they go with something like, you know, let's say bishop g7, then after d4, and where are we at? We're in the same opening, right? So they have definitely a problem with this bishop on g7. We are not allowing easy play for them. So we already seen this on the board. And some positions along this way can arise. Even if they trade this bishop on g7, now they have troubles on the dark squares, which is our useful idea to create some nice counterplay. I imagine queen b3 and nice pressure here can be very nasty. Also this knight, I believe, comes to f3 and so on. So after e5, they also have option of bishop g4. Then we anyway play d4, knight c6, and now bishop e5. That's important inclusion. Queen b6, we just take the knight. They take back. And now castles. So we gave up the light square bishop, but in return we got close position with knights. So after something like bishop to h6, knight b2 is just nice move, because you don't want to take on h6 and develop their knight. Like now knight is struggling how to develop, and that's why e6 looks very natural, trying to put the knight on e7 and later on to do something maybe on c6 when the queen moves. So a little bit black pieces are on the wrong spots. I believe that this bishop will be for sure traded for this knight at some point, because after h3 I'm not seeing this bishop coming back on any of these squares, since it will arise some g4. Rook e1, let's say here knight e7 looks very natural, and now we can simply take on c5. I think that queen cannot take because of some tactical idea. Yeah, queen e4, and then queen is threatening the king and then taking the bishop. So when they castle, we can go h3, they take, we take here with queen, and we are threatening again to bring our queen, to bring the knight here and maybe some b4. So if they take here again, now knight b3 is winning another piece, so that's bad for them. And if they take here, we're simply taking here, and now there's some checkmate idea of it. You know, typical like bishop h6 and queen f6 is already over. So knight b2 is possible. You can also go bishop e3 here like Hans played, and after take to open the f line, which is very possible. This structure is also very good for white, but I like more move knight b2 because this simply leaves this knight undeveloped, and they need still to burn 3 moves to develop this knight and find him game. Yes, that's the first part of Hans Niemann repertoires for white. We included so many openings. I mean, we included 4 different openings, but so many sidelines and variations. I hope you like it. Please leave a comment what you think about this kind of content, and if you like the video, leave a like, leave a subscribe. If you end up here, that's really nice to hear, because you watch the whole video, so you're ready to play and ready to start learning these variations. And also I'll put in the description the PGN course file about Hans Niemann's repertoire, something that I built very precisely and I wanted to create it for myself, and now I'm sharing with you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.